I found a compromising photo of my husband and my stepsister in his wallet. Instead of causing a scene, I printed hundreds of copies and spread them throughout his company the next morning, causing. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. 7 years of unwavering loyalty, 10 years of knowing him, and 3 years of what I thought was a perfect marriage, all of it crumbled into dust because of a photograph smaller than the palm of my hand. I stood there in the living room of our penthouse, the city lights of Seattle blurring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, clutching a piece of glossy paper that felt heavier than a stone. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was being pulverized. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a vase against the wall. I just stood there, frozen, while a cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. Just an hour ago, everything had been perfect. It was our 3rd wedding anniversary. Derek, the husband I adored with every fiber of my being, had taken me to the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The aroma of the truffle risotto and the expensive Cabernet still lingered on my tongue. I sat in the passenger seat on the way home, leaning my head against the cool glass, watching the streetlights streak by like shooting stars. Derek was driving, his hand resting gently on my knee, his touch familiar and grounding. "Are you tired, Valerie?" he had asked, his voice deep and tender, the voice that had soothed me through the loss of my father just a year prior. "You look beautiful tonight. The diamonds suit you." I had smiled, touching the diamond necklace he had given me over dinner. It was exquisite, though I knew, deep down, that the money used to purchase it likely came from the bonus I had approved for him last month from my family's company, Sterling Interiors. I didn't mind. I had inherited the empire, and sharing my wealth with the man I loved felt natural. "I'm so happy, Derek," I had whispered. "Thank you for everything." When we pulled into the garage of our building, Derek was the perfect gentleman, opening my door and kissing my forehead. "You go on up, Val. I have a quick call from a client on the East Coast. I might be down here a few minutes." I kissed his cheek and went up to the 25th floor. Our apartment was pristine, a testament to the life I had built. I kicked off my heels, feeling the fatigue of the day settle in, and walked past the sofa where Derek usually sat. That was when I saw it. His leather wallet. He must have pulled it out to tip the valet earlier and left it on the side table in his haste to take the call. I picked it up, intending to simply put it in his drawer. This wallet was a gift from me for his birthday last year, a high-end Italian leather piece engraved with his initials. A thought, innocent and childish, suddenly flashed through my mind. Had I ever really looked inside my husband's wallet? I trusted him absolutely. I believed that respecting each other's privacy was the bedrock of a modern marriage. But perhaps it was the wine, or perhaps it was a woman's intuition screaming from the depths of my subconscious. I laughed at my own silliness, expecting to find nothing but his credit cards, his driver's license, and maybe, just maybe, a picture of me. I sat down on the edge of the sofa and opened it. The first compartment held his platinum cards and the black card I had added him to. The next held a stack of $100 bills. I flipped to the window for his ID. There was his driver's license, his Sterling Interiors executive badge, and then, something tucked behind them caught my eye. A white edge. My heart skipped a beat, then slammed against my ribs. I pulled it out. It was a Polaroid. The colors were vivid, intimate. It wasn't a photo of me. My entire body went rigid. The photo showed a hotel room I didn't recognize. Derek was shirtless, his head thrown back in laughter, looking more radiant and carefree than I had seen him in months. And wrapped around him, her head resting possessively on his bare chest, was a woman. She was wearing a flimsy, lace nightgown that left very little to the imagination. Her hair was messy, cascading over my husband's shoulder. She was smiling straight at the camera. It wasn't a shy smile. It was a smirk. A triumphant, vicious, possessive smirk that I knew better than my own reflection. It was Tiffany. My stepsister. My world didn't just shatter, it evaporated. A sharp, physical pain shot through my chest, and bile rose in my throat. I clamped a hand over my mouth to suppress a sob. Tiffany? My stepsister, whom I had supported financially for years. The woman who called me sissy and borrowed my clothes? The woman I had given a job in the marketing department of my company? Why? Why them? My husband and my sister. The two people who were supposed to be my family, my safety net. I looked closer at the photo. The intimacy was undeniable. The way his hand rested on her waist. The way she leaned into him. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. They looked comfortable. They looked like a couple. And in Tiffany's eyes, I saw that familiar glint, the same look she had when she cut up my prom dress, the same look she had when she demanded my father buy her a car just like mine. It was the look of someone who had finally taken the one thing I valued most. A hot tear rolled down my cheek, followed by another. But as they fell, the shock began to morph into something else. Something cold. Something hard. I didn't tear the photo up. I didn't run downstairs to the garage to scream at him. I sat there, staring at their betrayal, and I let the image burn itself into my retinas. I wanted to remember this pain. I wanted to remember exactly how stupid I had been. I heard the elevator ding in the hallway. Derek was coming up. Panic flared for a second, but then, a strange calm took over. I quickly pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling, but I forced them to be steady. I placed the Polaroid on the table under the lamp and snapped a picture. Then another, closer up, ensuring Tiffany's smirk and Derek's face were crystal clear. I carefully slid the photo back behind his driver's license, exactly as I had found it. I placed the wallet back on the table, precisely at the angle it had been. Valerie? I'm home, Derek's voice called out from the foyer, cheerful and oblivious. I'm in the bath, darling. I called back, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears, steady, light, normal. I retreated to the bathroom and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back had red-rimmed eyes, but her jaw was set. I wasn't going to divorce him tonight. I wasn't going to let them win so easily. They had made a fool of me. Now, I would show them what happens when you cross the wrong woman. The water in the bathtub had turned cold long ago, but I hadn't moved. I lay there, submerged in the chill, letting it numb the fire of betrayal that was eating me alive from the inside out. My mind, usually cluttered with design schedules and board meeting agendas, was now singularly focused. A laser beam of clarity cut through the fog of my pain. If I confronted them now, what would happen? Derek would lie. Tiffany would cry crocodile tears. They would gaslight me, tell me I was crazy, or worse, they would simply leave together, taking a chunk of my dignity with them. No. That wasn't enough. I needed to destroy the pedestal Derek had built for himself. I needed to rip off Tiffany's mask of the innocent, struggling younger sister. I waited until I heard Derek's deep, rhythmic breathing from the bedroom. He slept so soundly. Of course he did. He had a rich wife paying his bills and a young mistress warming his ego. What did he have to worry about? I dressed silently in the dark, pulling on a black trench coat and sunglasses, though it was the middle of the night. I grabbed the spare keys to my old sedan, the one I kept for site visits, so the roar of my luxury SUV wouldn't wake him. I grabbed his wallet from the bedside table, carefully extracted the Polaroid, and slipped out of the apartment. It was 2 a.m. The city of Seattle was asleep, wrapped in a blanket of mist. I drove to a 24-hour print and copy center on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would recognize Valerie Sterling, the CEO. The neon sign of the shop buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow light on the pavement. Inside, a sleepy teenager with headphones around his neck barely looked up as I entered. I walked to the self-service machines. I placed the Polaroid on the scanner. The machine whirred to life. I selected color. I selected high quality. And then, for quantity, I typed in 500. The machine began its rhythmic thumping. Swish thump. Swish thump. With every sheet that slid into the tray, a small piece of my heart hardened. There they were, over and over again. Derek's laugh. Tiffany's smirk. 500 times. 500 proofs of my humiliation. But as the stack grew, it transformed. It was no longer just evidence of my pain, it was ammunition. I paid cash. I boxed up the poisonous butterflies, as I had started to call them in my head, and drove straight to the Sterling Interiors headquarters. My company was housed in a beautiful, modern glass building downtown. It was my father's legacy, and now, my battlefield. I used my master key card to enter the silent lobby. The security guard, old Mr. Miller, was on his rounds on the upper floors. The lobby was empty, vast, and imposing with its polished marble floors and the grand central fountain that trickled softly in the silence. I stood in the center of the atrium, holding the heavy box. This was the place Derek walked into every morning with his head held high, the king of sales, the husband of the CEO. This was where Tiffany strutted in her designer heels, bought with my money, acting like she owned the place. I took a deep breath, the smell of floor wax and ozone filling my lungs. I reached into the box. I didn't just place them. I threw them. I grabbed handfuls of the glossy photos and tossed them into the air. They fluttered down like confetti from hell, spinning and dancing before landing on the pristine white floor. I covered the reception desk. I lined the leather waiting chairs. I tossed them into the water of the fountain, where they floated, Derek's face bobbing on the ripples. I walked to the elevators and scattered a trail. I went up to the mezzanine level that overlooked the lobby and dumped the rest over the railing, creating a chaotic carpet of betrayal below. It was a mess. It was vandalism. It was beautiful. By 5 a.m., the lobby looked like a shrine to infidelity. I went up to my office on the top floor, my private sanctuary. I locked the door, brewed a pot of strong black coffee, and sat in my chair, turning it to face the glass wall that overlooked the lobby atrium below. I was the director of this play, and the curtain was about to rise. At 7 a.m., the first employees started to trickle in. I watched from my perch, unseen behind the tinted glass. A young receptionist was the first. She stopped dead in her tracks, dropping her purse. She bent down, picked up a photo, and I saw her hand fly to her mouth. She looked around, panicked, then picked up another. Then came the junior designers. The accountants. The whispers began. I couldn't hear them through the glass, but I saw the body language. Heads leaning together. Fingers pointing. Phones coming out. Flashbulbs popping. The photos were being photographed. The scandal was digitizing, spreading through the company group chats faster than a virus. At 8:15 a.m., the main event arrived. I saw Derek's black Mercedes pull up to the front glass doors. He stepped out, looking impeccable in his Italian suit, holding a coffee cup. And right behind him, stepping out of her red convertible, was Tiffany. They walked in together, chatting, laughing, maintaining the facade of the friendly brother-in-law and sister-in-law. They walked through the automatic doors. I leaned forward in my chair, my knuckles white as I gripped the armrests. I watched as Derek took his first step onto a photo of his own naked chest. He looked down, confused. He stopped. Tiffany bumped into him, annoyed, then looked down too. The reaction was visceral. Derek dropped his coffee cup. It splashed brown liquid over his polished shoes and onto the photos, but he didn't notice. He scrambled, dropping to his knees, frantically trying to gather the pictures. He was grabbing them by the handful, stuffing them into his pockets, clutching them to his chest as if his body could shield the truth from the hundreds of eyes now staring at him. Tiffany just screamed. A high, piercing shriek that I could almost hear through the glass. She backed away, covering her face, but there was nowhere to go. The photos were everywhere. The scene unfolding below me was chaotic, pathetic, and deeply satisfying. Derek looked like a man drowning, thrashing about in a sea of his own indiscretions. He was shouting something at the employees, probably ordering them to stop looking, to get back to work, but his authority had evaporated. He was no longer the respected director of sales, he was the naked man in the photo, the cheater, the fool. I stood up, smoothing the skirt of my dress. It was time for my entrance. I took the executive elevator down to the lobby. As the doors slid open, the hum of gossip and the scuffling sounds of Derek's frantic cleanup ceased. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Everyone turned to look at me. The betrayed wife. The CEO. I stepped out, my face a mask of confusion. I walked slowly toward the center of the lobby, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. What is going on here? I asked, my voice projecting clearly across the room. Why is no one working? Derek froze. He was on his knees, holding a crumpled pile of photos. He looked up at me, his face pale, sweat already beading on his forehead. Valerie. Val, don't look. Just go back upstairs. He tried to stand up to block my view, but he was too slow. I walked right past him and bent down to pick up a single photo lying near the fountain, one of the few he hadn't managed to grab. I held it up. I looked at it for a long, agonizing 5 seconds. The silence was so thick you could hear a pin drop. I looked at the photo. Then I looked at Derek. Then I looked at Tiffany, who was cowering near the reception desk, her face blotchy and red. Derek? I whispered, my voice trembling perfectly. What is this? Valerie, listen to me, Derek stammered, reaching for me. It's not what it looks like. It's a misunderstanding. Someone is trying to set us up. A set up? I repeated, my voice rising, cracking with fake emotion. This is you. This is Tiffany. In a hotel room. Is this why you were late last night? Is this why? I didn't let him answer. I let my eyes roll back slightly, my knees buckled, and I let myself fall. It was a controlled fall. I had practiced yoga for years, but to the onlookers, it looked like a devastating collapse. Miss Sterling, someone screamed. Valerie! Derek shouted. He caught me just before I hit the floor. Val, wake up! I kept my eyes shut, my body limp in his arms. I could feel his heart hammering against his chest like a trapped bird. I heard the murmurs of the employees turning into gasps of concern. Call 911, a secretary yelled. No! Derek shouted, his voice panicked. No ambulance. She's just in shock. I'll take her to her office. She just needs to lie down. Don't call anyone. I don't want this becoming a media circus. Of course he didn't. An ambulance meant records. It meant police might ask questions. It meant public attention. He was protecting himself, even now, while his wife lay unconscious in his arms. He scooped me up. Tiffany, get the elevator, he barked. I felt myself being carried to the elevator. Tiffany was sobbing, sniffing loudly. Oh God, is she dead? Shut up, Tiffany, Derek hissed. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the staring eyes of my employees. We were alone. The ride up to the 30th floor was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I had to focus on keeping my breathing shallow, my eyelids still. He carried me into my office and laid me on the plush leather sofa. He rushed to lock the door. Is she breathing? Tiffany asked, her voice trembling. Yes, she's breathing. She just fainted, Derek said, pacing the floor. I heard the sound of glass clinking. He was pouring himself a drink. We have to fix this. We have to fix this right now. How? Tiffany wailed. Everyone saw. Everyone saw us, Derek. My life is over. They're going to call me a homewrecker. Stop thinking about yourself for 1 second. Derek snapped. If she wakes up and decides to divorce me, we lose everything. The access to the accounts, the house, the cars. Everything is in her name, Tiffany. Sterling Interiors is hers. I lay there, listening to them discuss my assets while I was supposedly unconscious. It was chilling. They weren't worried about my broken heart. They were worried about the credit cards being cut off. So what do we do? Tiffany sniffled. We deny, Derek said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We tell her it's fake. AI generated. Or a prank. Or that we were drunk at a party years ago and nothing happened. She trusts me. She's always been soft. She'll believe me if I sell it hard enough. Soft. That was the word he used. I waited another minute, letting the silence stretch, letting their fear marinate. Then, I let out a low moan and fluttered my eyelids open. Valery? Derek was beside me in an instant, his face transforming into a mask of deep concern. He knelt by the sofa, taking my hand. Baby? Can you hear me? I blinked, looking around the room, focusing on his face. Derek? I whispered. I had a terrible nightmare. There were pictures. Derek squeezed my hand, looking me dead in the eye. Shoo. It's okay. You're okay. But the photos, I sat up, clutching my head. I saw them. You and Tiffany. Tiffany stepped forward, wiping her eyes. Valery, oh my God, I am so sorry you had to see those disgusting fake things. Fake? I looked at them, widening my eyes in confusion. Yes, fake. Derek insisted, nodding vigorously. Listen to me, Val. Remember that business trip to Vegas 2 years ago? The team party? We all got incredibly drunk. Someone. I don't know who, they must have taken photos of us goofing around and then doctored them. It's blackmail. Someone is trying to ruin the company by attacking our family. It was the most ridiculous, whole-filled story I had ever heard. The photo was clearly intimate, clearly recent, and definitely not doctored. But I looked at him, and I saw the desperation in his eyes. I let my lip tremble. I looked at Tiffany, then back at Derek. Blackmail? You mean, you didn't? Never. Derek declared, holding his hand over his heart. I love you, Valery. You are my wife. Tiffany is my sister-in-law. That's it. Gross. Who would even think that? I paused. I needed to sell this. I buried my face in Derek's chest and began to sob. I was so scared, Derek. I thought I lost you. Derek exhaled, a long sound of relief. He wrapped his arms around me, stroking my hair. Over his shoulder, I saw him exchange a look with Tiffany. It was a look of triumph. A look that said, we got her. She's stupid enough to believe us. It's okay, he cooed. I'll handle this. I'll find out who did this and fire them. Okay, I mumbled into his shirt. Okay. But inside, my heart was ice. Enjoy your victory, Derek, I thought. Because it's the last one you'll ever have. The performance continued for the rest of the morning. Derek was the picture of the doting husband, fetching me water, rubbing my back, and loudly proclaiming to anyone who walked past the office door that we were victims of a malicious cyber attack. He even called IT and yelled at them to scrub the servers of any digital copies, though the physical ones were already in trash bags. I played my part perfectly. I sat on the sofa, looking fragile and shaken. But every time Derek looked away, my eyes were scanning the room, calculating. "Tiffany," I said softly, breaking a silence that had lasted for 20 minutes. Tiffany jumped. She was sitting in the corner, scrolling nervously on her phone, probably checking social media to see if she was trending. "Yes, sissy? I think, for the sake of the company, and for your own reputation, maybe you should take some time off," I said. My voice was gentle, but there was a steel rod of command hidden in it. "What?" Tiffany looked indignant. "But I didn't do anything. Why should I leave? That makes me look guilty." "Valerie might be right," Derek interjected quickly. He understood the optics better than she did. "Just for a few weeks, Tiff. Until this blows over. Paid leave, of course." Tiffany glared at me, her jaw tight. I knew she hated being told what to do, especially by me. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "Please, Tiffany," I said, widening my eyes pleadingly. Seeing you right now, it brings that horrible image back to my mind. I need space to heal from this shock. If you care about me, you'll do this." I used her own weapon against her, emotional manipulation. If she refused, she would look heartless and confirm the affair. She huffed, grabbing her designer bag. "Fine. Whatever. I'll go to Mom's." She stormed out, slamming the door. "One down. One to go." "She's just upset," Derek said soothingly, sitting beside me. "She's young. She doesn't understand the pressure." "I know," I sighed. "Derek, can you go get me some herbal tea from the break room?" My hands are still shaking. "Of course, baby. Anything for you." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that now made my skin crawl, and left the office. The moment the door clicked shut, I moved. I was no longer the fragile wife. I was a ghost. I stood up and moved silently to his massive mahogany desk. I knew Derek. He was arrogant, but he was careless. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, sleek black device. It was a high-powered voice recorder I had bought months ago for board meetings but never used. It had a magnet on the back and a battery life of 3 days. I knelt down and stuck it securely to the underside of his desk, way in the back where his knees wouldn't bump it. Then, I pulled out a second device, a small GPS tracker I used for my luggage. I slipped it into the lining of his briefcase, which was sitting open by his chair. I was back on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow, by the time the doorknob turned. Derek walked in with a steaming mug. "Here you go. Chamomile." "Thank you," I said, taking it with both hands. "Derek?" "Yeah?" "I think I want to go home early today. I want to rest. But you should stay here. You need to manage the crisis. Show the employees that we aren't afraid." I saw the relief wash over his face. He wanted me gone so he could do damage control, and probably call Tiffany. "That's a brave decision, Val. You go rest. I'll hold down the fort." I left the office 10 minutes later. As I walked to the elevator, I passed employees who quickly looked down or pretended to be busy. I knew what they were thinking. Poor Valerie. She actually believes him. What a doormat. Let them think that. Being underestimated was my greatest advantage right now. I drove home, but I didn't go inside. I parked my car down the street and watched the entrance of our building. I needed to think. I needed to remember how I got here. How had I let these two parasites burrow so deep into my life? My mind drifted back, past the anniversary, past the wedding, all the way back to the beginning. To the moment the cuckoo bird landed in my nest. The rain was falling in sheets against the windshield, the rhythm tapping out a melody of old, buried memories. I closed my eyes and let the past pull me under. I was 12 years old when my mother died of cancer. The house, once filled with the smell of baking bread and the sound of her piano playing, went silent. My father, a brilliant but emotionally distant man, buried himself in his work at Sterling Interiors. I was left alone in a big, cold house, wandering the halls like a ghost. 2 years later, Brenda arrived. My father introduced her as a friend, but within months, she was wearing a ring. Brenda was loud, colorful, and overwhelming. She filled the silence, but not with music, with demands. And she didn't come alone. She brought Tiffany. Tiffany was 10. She had golden ringlets and big blue eyes that could fill with tears on command. "Valerie, this is your new sister," my father had said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You are the big sister now. You need to take care of her. She hasn't had the advantages you've had." That sentence became the soundtrack of my life. She hasn't had what you've had. From day one, Tiffany wanted what was mine. It started small. My dolls. My art supplies. My room. "Oh, Valerie, don't be selfish," Brenda would scold when I refused to give Tiffany my favorite sketchbook. "You can buy another one. Tiffany feels left out." So I gave it up. I learned that keeping the peace was more important than keeping my possessions. I learned that my father's approval only came when I was generous to his new family. But the memory that stung the most, the one that should have warned me about the woman Tiffany would become, happened on the night of my high school senior prom. I had saved my allowance for months to buy a vintage silk dress. It was emerald green, floor-length, and absolutely stunning. I felt beautiful in it. I felt seen. 2 days before the prom, I came home from school to find my bedroom door open. I walked in and stopped, my breath catching in my throat. Tiffany, then 16, was sitting on my floor with a pair of scissors. The emerald silk lay in shreds around her. She wasn't just cutting it, she was destroying it. "What did you do?" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. Tiffany looked up, her eyes wide and innocent. I just wanted to try it on. But the zipper got stuck, and I panicked. I had to cut myself out. "You're lying." I lunged for the dress, clutching the ruined fabric. "You ruined it on purpose." Brenda rushed in, alerted by the screaming. She took one look at the scene, Tiffany sobbing on the floor, me holding the scissors I had snatched up, and she made her judgment. "Valerie, put those scissors down. Are you threatening your sister? She destroyed my dress." I cried, tears streaming down my face. "My prom dress. It was an accident." Tiffany wailed, burying her face in Brenda's skirt. "I just wanted to be beautiful like Valerie." Brenda glared at me. "Look at her, Valerie. She looks up to you. It's just a dress. Your father can buy you another one. Why do you have to be so dramatic and make her feel bad?" My father, when he came home, didn't even look at the ruined silk. He just handed me his credit card and told me to fix it. "Don't upset Brenda, Val. I have a big merger coming up. I need peace at home." I wore a store-bought dress to prom. It didn't fit right. I felt invisible. Tiffany, I later found out, had worn the scraps of the green silk as a sash to a party the next week. She paraded my destruction like a trophy. That was the dynamic. I built, they took. I earned, they spent. I forgave, they repeated. And now, 20 years later, nothing had changed. Tiffany hadn't just cut up a dress, she had taken a pair of scissors to my marriage. And Brenda? I knew, with a sinking certainty, that Brenda was probably telling Tiffany right now that it wasn't her fault. That I was the selfish one for having a husband Tiffany wanted. I opened my eyes, staring at the rain-slicked street. The little girl who gave up her sketchbook was gone. The teenager who cried over a ruined dress was gone. I started the car. It was time to go home and listen to what the ghost in Derek's office had to say. Before I could face the present, my mind dragged me to the other half of this equation. Derek. I met him 5 years ago at a Sterling Interiors Company mixer. I was 33, the heir apparent to the CEO position, but socially awkward and perpetually single. I was used to men looking at me and seeing a dollar sign, or looking right through me to see the prettier, louder women in the room. Derek was different. Or so he seemed. He was a new junior sales associate, hungry and charismatic. He walked right up to me, ignored the expensive scotch being served, and handed me a napkin. "You have a little smudge of mascara right here," he said softly, pointing to his own cheek. "I didn't want you to walk around and feel embarrassed later." It was such a small, human gesture. Most men would have let me look foolish. We started talking. He didn't ask about my stock options. He asked about my favorite books. He asked about my design philosophy. He listened. He looked at me with an intensity that made me feel like the only person in the room. For 6 months, he courted me. He brought me wildflowers instead of expensive roses because I once mentioned I liked them. He drove me to old bookstores. He charmed my father, talking business strategy with a respectful deference. Brenda and Tiffany, of course, were skeptical. Not because they protected me, but because they feared losing their cash cow. "He's just a salesman, Valery," Brenda had sniffed. "He's not of our caliber." But when Tiffany met him, the dynamic shifted. I remember the first time I brought him to dinner at the family estate. Tiffany, then 23, wore a dress that was too tight and laughed too loud at all his jokes. She touched his arm repeatedly. "Your boyfriend is so hot, Val," she had whispered to me in the kitchen. "Are you sure you can keep him?" I brushed it off as Tiffany being Tiffany. I was confident. Derek chose me. Our wedding day was a lavish affair at the estate. I wore a Vera Wang gown, feeling like a princess. But when I walked down the aisle, I heard a murmur ripple through the crowd. I looked to the front row. There was Tiffany. She was supposed to be a bridesmaid in lilac. Instead, she had accidentally spilled red wine on her dress 10 minutes before the ceremony and had changed into her backup dress. It was white. A floor-length, white lace gown that looked almost exactly like a wedding dress. She sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes, looking for all the world like the bride. I faltered in my step. My father squeezed my arm. "Just ignore her, Val. Don't make a scene." I looked at Derek at the altar. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were flicking momentarily to Tiffany in the front row. A look of amusement? Appreciation? It happened so fast I thought I imagined it. When we exchanged vows, he squeezed my hands tight. "I promised to honor you, to protect you, and to build a legacy with you." I believed him. The mask didn't slip until my father died a year later. I was devastated. My father was the only person who truly loved me, flawed as he was. At the funeral, I was a mess, barely able to stand. Derek stood beside me, his hand on my back. But he wasn't comforting me. He was leaning in, whispering in my ear while the priest spoke. "Did your father sign the addendum to the trust before he passed?" he whispered. I looked at him through my black veil, confused. "What?" "The addendum, Val. The one giving you full control of the voting shares immediately." "Did he sign it?" I don't know, Derek. Not now. It's important, Val. We need to secure the company before Brenda tries anything." He sounded practical. He sounded protective. But looking back now, I realized he wasn't protecting me. He was protecting the asset. He was terrified that Brenda would get a chunk of the inheritance that he was planning to spend. That night, after the funeral, while I cried myself to sleep, Derek was in his study with a bottle of whiskey and a calculator. I drove my car into the garage of our building, the memory fading. The supportive husband was a myth. He had been hunting me from the moment he handed me that napkin. He saw a lonely, wealthy woman with low self-esteem and a massive inheritance. I was the perfect mark. And Tiffany? She saw her sister getting something shiny, and she just couldn't resist taking it. I parked the car and took the elevator up. The apartment was empty. Derek was still at the office, probably pretending to work while frantically deleting emails. I went straight to my laptop. I had synced the recording device to a cloud server. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. It was time to hear the truth. My hands shook as I logged into the secure portal. The interface showed a new audio file, recorded just 30 minutes ago. The timestamp indicated it started shortly after I had left the office. I clicked play. At first, there was just the sound of a door locking and footsteps pacing on the hardwood floor. Then, the sound of a phone dialing. Pick up, Derek's voice hissed. I click. Then Tiffany's voice came through the car speakers via Bluetooth. Derek had put her on speakerphone. Is she gone? Tiffany asked. Her voice wasn't the whiny, scared tone she had used earlier. It was sharp, annoyed. Yes, she went home to rest. God, Tiff, you almost blew it today. Screaming like a banshee? I was scared. Tiffany snapped. Do you know how humiliating that was? I had to walk past the receptionist, and she smirked at me. This is all your fault. You said that wallet was in your jacket. I made a mistake, okay? But we salvaged it. She bought the story. She's completely snowed. Are you sure? Tiffany asked. She acted weird. The fainting thing? Valerie never faints. She's built like a horse. She was in shock. She's weak, Tiffany. You know that. She's desperate to keep this marriage together. She'd believe aliens landed if it meant she didn't have to be alone. I gripped the edge of my desk. She's weak. Is that what he thought? Well, we have a bigger problem now, Tiffany said, her voice dropping lower. I went to the doctor this morning before coming to the office. And? Derek's voice sounded tight. And it's confirmed. I'm pregnant, Derek. 8 weeks. The air left the room. I stopped breathing. Pregnant. Tiffany was pregnant with my husband's child. We had been trying for 2 years. Derek always said it just wasn't happening or that he was too stressed. But he had impregnated my sister. Shit, Derek muttered. Then a silence. Then, okay. Okay. This complicates the timeline. Complicates? Tiffany shrieked. I'm not getting an abortion, Derek. I want this baby. And I want us to be a real family. I'm tired of hiding in hotels. I'm tired of watching her walk around in my house, wearing my diamonds. It's not your house yet, Tiff, Derek snapped. Keep your voice down. When, Derek? You promised me. You said by the anniversary you'd have the power of attorney. I'm working on it. The old man's will was watertight. She has to sign over the executive control voluntarily. I need her to sign the Sterling Green project authorization first. That gets us the $5 million cash. Then, I get her to sign the management proxy because she's too stressed to run the company. And then? Tiffany pushed. She's still there. She's still your wife. There was a long pause on the recording. A pause that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Not for long, Derek said. His voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. Once I have the proxy and the power of attorney over her medical decisions, accidents happen, Tiff. What kind of accident? Tiffany asked. She didn't sound horrified. She sounded curious. She drives that old sedan to site visits. The brakes on that thing are tricky. Or, she takes those beta blockers for her anxiety? It wouldn't be hard to swap them for something stronger. Something that stops a heart in its sleep. Plan B, Tiffany said. Like we talked about. Plan B, Derek confirmed. But only if she doesn't sign. If she signs, we can just divorce her and leave her with nothing but the debt from the shell companies. But if she fights, well, I'm not walking away poor, Tiffany. I've put 5 years into this miserable woman. I'm cashing out. I love you, baby, Tiffany cooed. You're so smart. I love you too. Take care of our little heir. Now hang up, I have to pretend to work. The recording ended. I sat in the silence of my apartment, removing the headphones. My body was vibrating. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a primal, burning rage. They weren't just cheaters. They were monsters. They were discussing my murder, as casually as ordering lunch. Tiffany wanted my life, my husband, and my death. Derek wanted my money and was willing to kill me for it. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. Plan B, I whispered to the empty room. You want an accident, Derek? You want a casualty? I stood up and walked to the wall safe hidden behind a painting. I punched in the code. Inside was my passport, some emergency cash, and my father's old Colt .45. I ignored the gun. I reached for the thick leather binder at the back. My estate documents. I flipped through them. Derek was right. The current will named him as the primary beneficiary. If I died tonight, he got everything. The company, the house, the accounts. He had a motive. He had a plan. And he had a timeline. I checked the time. It was 4 p.m. Lawyer Henderson's office closed at 6 o'clock. I grabbed the binder. I grabbed a USB drive and copied the audio file onto it. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I was going to war. But first, I had to make sure that if I died in this war, they wouldn't get a single penny. I grabbed my keys, not the sedan keys, I would never drive that car again, but the keys to my SUV. You're cashing out, Derek? I said to the air. Let's see what happens when the check bounces. The offices of Henderson and Associates were located in a historic brick building in Pioneer Square. Mr. Henderson had been my father's lawyer for 40 years. He was the one man my father trusted implicitly, and by extension, the one man I hoped would believe me. I burst into the reception area, bypassing the startled secretary. I need to see Arthur. Now. Ms. Sterling? He's in a meeting. I don't care, I said, pushing open the heavy oak doors to his private office. Arthur Henderson, a man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, looked up from his desk. He was meeting with a junior associate. Seeing the look on my face, my wild eyes, my pale skin, he immediately waved the associate out. Valery? What's wrong? Is it the business? I slammed the leather binder onto his desk. Then I tossed the USB drive next to it. I need to change my will. Today. Right now. Arthur stood up, concerned. Valery, slow down. What's happened? They're planning to kill me, Arthur, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. Derek and Tiffany. They're having an affair. She's pregnant. And they just discussed tampering with my brakes or poisoning me if I don't sign over the company. Arthur's face went white. He didn't question me. He didn't ask if I was sure. He knew my stepfamily. He had warned my father about Brenda years ago. Sit down, he commanded, his voice shifting from kindly uncle to ruthless attorney. Tell me everything. I played him the recording. As Derek's voice filled the room, discussing Plan B, Arthur's jaw tightened until a muscle feathering in his cheek jumped. When it finished, he slammed his fist onto the desk. That son of a bitch. I'll have him arrested tonight. We'll take this to the district attorney. No! I interrupted. Not yet. Valery, this is conspiracy to commit murder. You are in danger. If we arrest him now, it's just talk, I argued, my mind racing with the strategy one had formulated on the drive over. He'll say he was venting. He'll say it was a bad joke. He has the best lawyers my money bought him. And Tiffany, she'll play the victim. I need more. I need to catch them stealing. I need to nail them for embezzlement so they go away for decades, not just a few months on a plea deal. It's too risky, Arthur argued. I'll be careful. I won't eat anything he gives me. I won't drive the sedan. But first, we need to cut off the money. If I die, Arthur, promise me he gets nothing. Arthur nodded grimly. He pulled up a document on his computer. We are drafting an emergency codicil. We revoke all previous wills. We remove Derek as beneficiary of the life insurance and the trust. Who do you want to leave it to? Charity, I said without hesitation. The Cat Rescue Foundation. The library. I don't care. Anyone but them. And Brenda, cut her stipend. Today. Done, Arthur typed furiously. But Valery, we need a trap. If they want the company, we need to use that greed against them. I know, I said. Derek wants me to sign off on a project called Sterling Green. It involves transferring $5 million to vendors I suspect are fake. Arthur looked up, his eyes gleaming behind his spectacles. Let him do it. What? Let him set it up. Let him create the paper trail. But don't sign the final authorization yet. We will prepare a dossier. We'll hire a forensic accountant to trace those vendors. Once we prove they are shell companies owned by him, we have him for fraud and embezzlement. That, combined with the recording, puts him away for 20 years. He wants me to sign a management proxy, I added. He wants full control because I'm too stressed out. Arthur smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. Then let's give him a proxy. We'll draft a document that looks like a standard proxy, but with a clause he won't notice. Or better yet, we prepare the real proxy, and you invite him to a board meeting to sign it. A public execution. A public execution, I repeated, tasting the words. I like that. We spent the next 2 hours finalizing the new will. I signed it with a steady hand. Arthur notarized it immediately. One copy stays here in the vault, Arthur said. One copy goes to the bank safety deposit box. Valery, you are now worth $0 to him dead. In fact, you're worth $- because the moment you die, the fraud investigation triggers automatically. Good, I said, standing up. But he doesn't know that yet. Are you going back there? Arthur asked, worry returning to his eyes. I have to. I have to play the part of the naive, trusting wife for a few more days. I need him to feel safe enough to launch the Sterling Green transfer. Take this, Arthur opened his drawer and handed me a small card. Private security. I'll have a man parked outside your building 24/7 starting tonight. If you feel unsafe, you signal. Thank you, Arthur. I walked out of the office into the cool evening air. I felt lighter. The target was still on my back, but now, I was wearing armor. I drove home. As I entered the apartment, Derek was on the couch, watching TV, looking relaxed. "Hey, babe," he said, standing up to kiss me. "Feeling better?" I forced a smile, fighting the urge to vomit as his lips touched my cheek. "Much better, honey." I went for a drive to clear my head. "And you know what? You were right." "I was?" Derek looked surprised. "Yes. I am stressed. I think I'm ready to look at that sterling green project. And maybe the proxy too." Derek's eyes lit up. It was the look of a wolf spotting a limping deer. "That's a great decision, Val. I'll take care of everything." "I know you will," I said, walking past him to the bedroom. "I know you will." Just wait, I thought. The trap is set. The game of cat and mouse is exhausting, especially when you are the one pretending to be the mouse. For the next 3 days, I lived in a state of hypervigilance. I checked my food for odd tastes. I checked my car for leaks. I slept with one eye open. But outwardly, I was Valery the defeated. Valery the frail. Valery, the woman who was slowly crumbling under the weight of a scandal that her husband had so graciously fixed. Derek was watching me closely. I could feel his gaze on the back of my neck when I poured coffee. I could see him tracking my movements in the mirrors of our apartment. He was waiting for me to crack, or perhaps, waiting for the right moment to enact Plan B. I had to convince him that Plan B wasn't necessary. I had to convince him that Plan A, the theft, was a sure thing. The opportunity came during a dinner I felt obligated to host for Brenda. Since I had banished Tiffany, Brenda had been calling me incessantly, oscillating between guilt-tripping me and feigning concern for my health. "You look pale, Valery," Brenda said the moment she walked into the penthouse. She didn't hug me. She just critiqued me. She was wearing a Chanel suit that I knew my father's money had paid for years ago. "Doesn't she look pale, Derek?" "She's been under a lot of stress, Brenda," Derek said, playing the role of the protective husband perfectly. He pulled out her chair. The incident at the office really shook her. "Well, that's what happens when you let your emotions run wild," Brenda sniffed, unfolding her napkin. "Valery always was too sensitive. Just like her mother." I gritted my teeth, forcing a weak smile. "I know, Brenda. I'm trying to get better." I waited until the main course, a roast chicken I had prepared myself to ensure it wasn't tampered with, was served. I pushed the food around my plate, letting my shoulders slump. "I've been thinking a lot," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "About what you said, Brenda. About how I might not be cut out for the pressure of the CEO role right now." The silence at the table was instantaneous. I looked up through my lashes. Derek and Brenda were exchanging a glance. It was a hungry glance. "Oh," Derek said, leaning forward. "What do you mean, honey?" "I mean, look at me." I gestured to my tired face, accentuated by a lack of makeup and carefully applied dark circles. "I'm fainting at work. I'm paranoid. I'm making a scene in front of employees. I think Dad put too much on me. Maybe I should just enjoy the life he built for me, instead of trying to run the machine." "That is the most sensible thing I've heard you say in years," Brenda said, reaching for her wineglass to hide her smile. "A woman needs peace, Valery. Stress creates wrinkles. And it ruins marriages." "I agree," I said. Then, I dropped the bait. "That's why I went to see Arthur Henderson the other day." Derek froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "You saw Henderson? Why?" "I wanted to review the estate planning," I lied smoothly. I wanted to make sure that if anything happens to me, or if I just decide to retire early, that you are taken care of, Derek." "Me?" Derek choked out. "Of course. You're my husband." I told Arthur that the current will feels too restrictive. I told him I want to draft a new structure. One where I hand over the operational control to you while I'm alive, so I don't have to worry about it. And what did Arthur say?" Derek asked, his voice trembling with suppressed excitement. "He's preparing the paperwork," I said. "He's drafting the management proxy we talked about. And he's looking over the Sterling Green proposal. He said if I sign off on the project, it proves I trust your judgment. And if I trust your judgment, the board will have to accept the proxy." I looked Derek dead in the eyes. "I want to sign it, Derek. I want to give you the reins. I just need a few days to get my strength back. Can we do it next week? Maybe call a board meeting?" Derek exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh. The tension in his shoulders dropped. He looked at me not with hatred, but with the affection one gives to a particularly obedient golden retriever. "Of course, baby," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Take all the time you need. Next week is perfect. I'll set everything up. You won't regret this. I'm going to take this company to heights your father never dreamed of." "I'm so proud of you, Valerie," Brenda added, beaming. "Finally, you're putting your family first." I looked down at my plate to hide the disgust in my eyes. They bought it. They thought I was handing them the keys to the kingdom. Derek wouldn't tamper with my breaks tonight. He wouldn't poison my tea. Why would he kill the goose that was about to lay the golden egg? He needed me alive to sign that proxy. He needed me alive to legitimize his takeover. Plan B was off the table. Plan A, the public humiliation and theft, was in full swing. And they had no idea that by walking into Plan A, they were walking straight into a prison cell. 2 days later, the atmosphere in the Sterling Interior's office shifted. It wasn't subtle. It was as if a noxious gas had been pumped into the ventilation system. Tiffany was back. Technically, she was supposed to be on leave, but Derek had brought her back as an external consultant for the Sterling Green project. He claimed her marketing expertise was essential for the launch. It was a bold, arrogant move, banking on the fact that I was too weak to object. And I didn't object. I stayed in my office, door closed, watching them on the monitors connected to the hidden cameras I had installed over the weekend. Tiffany didn't walk, she strutted. She had cut her hair into a sharp, expensive bob and was wearing a white suit that looked suspiciously like something from my favorite designer's new collection, bought with the company credit card, no doubt. She barked orders at the assistants who had been her peers just a week ago. "Move that desk," I heard her say through the audio feed. "I want the corner office next to Derek's. And get rid of those ugly paintings. They look like something a dead old man would pick." My blood boiled. Those were my father's paintings. But the real blow came around lunchtime. I watched on the screen as Derek left his office for a meeting. Tiffany waited a few minutes, then slipped inside. She didn't look like she was working. She sat in his chair, spinning around, running her hands over the leather armrests. She picked up the framed photo of me and Derek that sat on his desk, a photo from our honeymoon, and placed it face down. Then, she opened the bottom drawer of his desk. She rummaged around for a moment and pulled out a manila envelope. She opened it, looked at the contents, and smiled a smile of pure, maternal smugness. She held a piece of paper against her chest, closed her eyes, and swayed. I zoomed in on the camera feed. It was grainy, but I could make out the distinct black and white contrast of a medical image. An ultrasound. She was keeping the picture of their love child in my husband's desk, in the office my father built. It was a violation so profound it made me feel physically ill. It wasn't just an affair, it was a replacement. She wasn't just stealing my husband, she was erasing my existence. I decided I needed that envelope. It was physical evidence of the motive. The audio recording was strong, but a jury seeing an ultrasound hidden in the CEO's office? That painted a picture of premeditation. I waited until 1 p.m., when I knew they would go to lunch together at the French bistro down the street, on the company dime, naturally. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind them, I moved. I walked briskly down the hall to Derek's office. The door was unlocked. Arrogance always breeds carelessness. I went straight to the bottom drawer. It was messy, gym socks, protein bars, and there, tucked under a stack of sales reports, was the envelope. I pulled it out. My hands trembled as I slid the photo out. There it was. A tiny, gray bean shape. Baby Johnson. 8 weeks. Staring at it, I felt a strange pang of sadness. Not for me, and certainly not for them, but for this innocent life. This child was being born into a web of lies, created by two people who valued money over morality. This child was a pawn before it was even born. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the grainy image. "But your parents have to pay for what they've done." I took a photo of the ultrasound with my phone, ensuring the date and name were visible. Then, I noticed something else in the envelope. A receipt. I pulled it out. It was a receipt from a high-end jewelry store, dated 3 days ago. Diamond tennis bracelet. $12,000. I touched my own wrist, bare. Derek hadn't bought me jewelry in a year, except for the anniversary necklace bought with my own money. This bracelet was for her. A push present for the pregnancy? Or a reward for keeping quiet? I took a photo of the receipt too. Financial infidelity. Another nail in the coffin. I carefully put everything back exactly as I found it. I needed them to feel secure. I needed them to think their secrets were safe in the dark. As I walked back to my office, I ran into my assistant, Sarah. She had been with the company for 10 years, loyal to my father, and I had sensed her pitying glances all week. "Miss Sterling?" she asked, clutching a file. Are you okay?" I looked at her. I saw the worry in her eyes. I realized I couldn't do this entirely alone. I needed a witness on the inside. Someone to herd the cats when the bomb went off. "Sarah," I said, my voice low. "I need you to do something for me. But you can't ask questions, and you can't tell a soul. Not even your husband." Sarah straightened up. "Anything, Valerie. You know that." "Tomorrow is the board meeting," I said. "I need you to ensure the projector in the boardroom is connected to my laptop, not Derek's. And I need you to lock the doors from the outside once the meeting starts. No one leaves until I say so." Sarah's eyes widened. She looked at me, really looked at me, and she must have seen the fire behind the frail mask. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face. "I'll make sure the connection is seamless," she whispered. "And I'll stand guard at the door myself." "Thank you, Sarah." I went back to my office and sat down. The ultrasound, the bracelet, the shell companies, the recording. The puzzle was almost complete. There was only one piece left. The money. I checked my email. A notification popped up. It was from Derek. Subject: Sterling Green, final authorization needed for transfer. Body: "Hey honey, hope you're resting. Here is the final paperwork for the vendor payments we discussed. Once you authorize this, we can break ground. Love you." Attached was a digital request for a wire transfer of $5 million to Greenleaf Logistics, a company Arthur Henderson had confirmed was registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands under a shell corporation linked to Tiffany's maiden name. He was asking me to sign the check that would rob me blind. I opened the file. The cursor blinked on the signature line. "Come and get it, Derek," I whispered. The next morning, Derek came into my office with a swagger that was almost comical. He held a leather folio under his arm, and the smell of his expensive cologne, bought with my salary, filled the room. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, placing the folio on my desk. "Today is a big day. The start of a new era for Sterling Interiors." "Is it?" I asked, looking up from my computer. I kept my face blank, my hands folded on the desk to hide the slight tremor. "Absolutely. The Sterling Green Project. Sustainable luxury woods from South America. It's going to double our profit margins by Q4. And with the management proxy, well, you can finally take that vacation to Tuscany you've always wanted. Just you, relaxing, while I handle the grunt work." He opened the folio. Inside were 2 documents. The first was the wire transfer authorization for $5 million. The second was the management proxy agreement, giving him full legal authority to act on behalf of the CEO for a period of 5 years. 5 years. He intended to bleed the company dry and discard the husk before I could even blink. "Walk me through the numbers one more time, Derek," I said, feigning confusion. My head is still a little foggy from the medication. Derek sighed, a tiny sound of impatience masked his concern. He came around the desk and stood behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders. He began to massage them. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. "Val, we've been over this. Greenleaf Logistics handles the import tariffs and the sourcing. We have to pay them upfront to secure the timber rights. It's standard industry practice. If we wait, competitors will swoop in." "And you've vetted them?" I asked. Arthur mentioned he hadn't heard of them. Derek's hands tightened slightly on my shoulders. "Arthur is old school, Val. He doesn't understand the emerging markets. I vetted them personally. I flew down there last month, remember? Their operation is top-notch." He lied so easily. The trip down there had actually been a weekend getaway to Cabo with Tiffany. I had the flight records now, thanks to Arthur's investigator. "Okay," I said, my voice small. "If you say so, Derek. I trust you." "That's my girl," he whispered, kissing the top of my head. "Just sign here and here. And then the proxy." I can't sign the proxy just yet," I said. Derek froze. "Why not?" "Because of the bylaws," I explained. Arthur reminded me that for a transfer of power this significant, it has to be witnessed by the full board of directors. It has to be done in an official meeting. Otherwise, the shareholders could sue us. Derek's face darkened for a split second, but he quickly recovered. "Okay. That makes sense. Bureaucracy, right? But I can sign the money transfer now," I offered, throwing him a bone. "So we don't lose the timber." "Yes," Derek said eagerly. "Yes, do that. We can do the proxy at the board meeting this afternoon. I've already sent the invites." I picked up my pen. It was a heavy Mont Blanc, a gift from my father when I graduated business school. It felt like a weapon in my hand. I looked at the wire transfer document. Pay to the order of Greenleaf Logistics. Amount, $5 million. If I signed this, the money would leave the company accounts instantly. It was risky. If the police didn't act fast enough, that money could disappear into offshore accounts forever. It was a $5 million gamble. But without this theft, I only had a conspiracy charge, which was harder to prove. With this, I had grand larceny. I had wire fraud. I had a paper trail that led directly to prison. I looked at Derek. He was practically vibrating with greed. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at the pen tip. I lowered the pen. I signed my name. Valery Sterling. Derek snatched the paper away the moment I lifted the pen. Perfect. I'll run this to accounting personally. We don't want any delays. Derek? I called out as he turned to leave. Yeah, babe? Are you sure this is going to make us happy? He stopped, turning back with a dazzling smile. Valerie, this is going to change our lives. Trust me. He walked out. I waited 5 seconds. Then I picked up my phone and texted Arthur Henderson. The Eagle has landed. The money is moving. Get the forensic team ready to trace it. See you at the board meeting at 3 o'clock. I leaned back in my chair. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. I had just robbed my own company to catch a thief. I opened my laptop and checked the internal server. I could see the request hitting the finance department. I saw the approval. I saw the processing bar. $5 million. Gone. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tiffany, sent to Derek, but intercepted by the cloning software I had installed on his phone last night while he slept. Did the old hag sign? Derek's reply, signed, sealed, delivered. We are rich, baby. Champagne is on ice. Champagne, I thought. I hope you enjoy the taste of prison toilet wine instead. I stood up and walked to the window. The city of Seattle lay below me, gray and rainy. It was the perfect backdrop for a funeral. And today, at 3 p.m., I was going to bury my marriage and my sister's career. I turned away from the window and walked to the closet in my office. I pulled out the garment bag I had brought in earlier. I took off the beige, submissive wife cardigan I had been wearing all week. I took off the sensible flats. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a suit I hadn't worn in years. It was blood red. Sharp tailoring. Shoulders that could cut glass. I put it on. I applied a layer of red lipstick. I looked in the mirror. Valerie the victim was gone. Valerie the CEO was back. The hours between the wire transfer and the board meeting were a psychological gauntlet. Derek and Tiffany were riding a high, their arrogance practically radiating off them in waves. But Brenda was the variable I hadn't fully calculated. At 2 p.m., 1 hour before the meeting, Brenda barged into my office. She didn't knock. She never knocked. Valerie, she said, closing the door behind her with a definitive click. We need to talk. She sat down opposite me, smoothing her skirt. She looked at my red suit, and her eyes narrowed. She sensed the change in energy, even if she couldn't pinpoint it. You look intense, she noted. I'm just preparing for the meeting, Brenda. Is something wrong? I want to make sure you're doing the right thing today, she said, her voice dropping to that sickly sweet tone she used when she was about to twist a knife. Derek tells me you're signing over full control. That is a big step. It's what you wanted, isn't it? You said I needed to rest. I did, she nodded. But I need to be sure you aren't going to have one of your episodes. Episodes? I asked, my voice cold. You know, she waved a manicured hand vaguely. Your mother had them too toward the end. The paranoia. The mood swings. Thinking people were against her. I've seen the way you look at Tiffany lately. It's not healthy, Valerie. It's bordering on delusional. I stared at her. This was the narrative they were building. If I fought back, if I refused to sign, they were going to claim I was mentally unstable. They would use my mother's illness against me to invalidate my authority. It was gaslighting weaponized. I'm fine, Brenda, I said, keeping my voice steady. Are you? She leaned forward. Because if you cause a scene in that boardroom today, if you embarrass this family, we might have to consider a conservatorship. For your own good, of course. Derek has been talking to doctors. We're very worried about your cognitive decline. A chill went down my spine. A conservatorship. They wanted to Britney Spears me. They wanted to lock me away, dope me up, and spend my money while I rotted in a facility. This was the threat. Sign the proxy, or we lock you up. I looked at the woman who had raised me for 20 years. I looked for a shred of affection, a hint of humanity. I found nothing but greed and malice. You don't have to worry, Brenda, I said, leaning forward until our faces were inches apart. I am going to do exactly what needs to be done today. I am going to ensure the future of this company is secure. Once and for all. Brenda smiled, mistaking my resolve for submission. Good girl. You always were the obedient one. Unlike Tiffany. Tiffany is wild, but she has fire. You were always just the worker bee. Worker bees have stingers, Brenda, I said softly. What? Nothing. I'll see you in the boardroom. She left, looking triumphant. She thought she had cowed me. She had no idea she had just poured gasoline on the fire. I checked my phone. A text from Sarah. The board is seated. The projector is prepped. Security is on standby in the hallway. I took a deep breath. I picked up the folder containing the proxy, which was actually just a blank legal pad inside a leather cover. I picked up the USB drive containing the evidence. I walked out of my office. The hallway felt like a runway. My heels clicked loudly on the floor. Click. Clack. Click. Clack. The sound of a ticking clock. I passed Derek's office. He was straightening his tie in the reflection of the window. Tiffany was beside him, picking lint off his jacket. They looked like a power couple. They looked like they owned the place. Ready, darling? Derek asked, seeing me. He did a double take at the red suit. Whoa. Bold color choice. I thought it was appropriate, I said. Red is the color of warning, isn't it? Or passion, he winked, grabbing my waist. Let's go make history. Tiffany smirked at me. Try not to faint this time, sissy. I won't, I promised. I'm feeling very wide awake. We walked to the boardroom together. The heavy double doors were open. Inside, 12 board members, men and women who had worked with my father, investors who held the fate of the company, were seated around the massive oval table. Arthur Henderson was there, sitting at the far end. He nodded imperceptibly at me. I walked to the head of the table. The CEO's chair. Derek pulled out the chair to my right. Tiffany sat next to him, opening a notepad as if she had any business being there. Brenda sat in the corner, watching like a hawk. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice ringing out clear and strong. Thank you for coming on such short notice. We understand there is a major restructuring announcement, said Mr. Sterling, no relation, just a coincidence, one of the oldest board members. Is it true you are stepping down, Valery? I looked at Derek. He was practically salivating. He nodded at me, encouraging me to say the words. There is a restructuring, I said. But before we get to the paperwork, I think it is vital that the board understands the current state of our leadership. I have prepared a short presentation. A presentation? Derek whispered, confused. Val, we didn't discuss this. It's just a tribute, honey, I patted his hand. To show them why you are the right man for the job. Derek relaxed, puffing out his chest. Ah. Of course. Proceed. I signaled to Sarah, who was standing by the laptop. Hit it, Sarah. The lights dimmed. The screen behind me flickered to life. Everyone, I said. I want to show you exactly who Derek Johnson really is. The room went dark, illuminated only by the glow of the massive projection screen. The hum of the projector fan was the only sound in the room. Derek leaned back in his chair, a smug smile plastered on his face, expecting a montage of his sales achievements or perhaps photos of us cutting ribbons at charity events. The first image appeared. It wasn't a sales chart. It wasn't a ribbon cutting. It was the photo. The Polaroid. Blown up to 10 feet tall. Derek shirtless in the hotel room. Tiffany in her lingerie, smirking. The intimacy was undeniable. The betrayal was gigantic. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. A coffee cup clattered onto a saucer. What on earth? Brenda shrieked from the corner. Derek bolted upright, his chair scraping violently against the floor. What is this? Valerie! Turn it off! This is the fake photo. I told you. Sit down, Derek, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was commanded with such absolute authority that he actually paused. Sarah, play the video, I ordered. The image shifted. It was a video clip taken from the hidden camera in my office yesterday. The audio boomed through the high-quality speakers of the boardroom. Derek's voice, she's weak, Tiffany. You know that. She's desperate to keep this marriage together. Once I have the proxy, accidents happen, Tiff. Tiffany's voice, Plan B. Like we talked about. The boardroom erupted. Oh my God, one board member whispered. Are they talking about murder? Another asked, horrified. Derek was frozen. His face had gone from flush to a sickly, ash-gray color. He looked at the screen, then at me, his eyes wide with terror. He realized, in that second, that I hadn't been fainting. I hadn't been resting. I had been recording. Tiffany let out a strangled sob. She tried to stand up. This is illegal. You can't record us. I'll sue you. Actually, Arthur Henderson spoke up from the end of the table, his voice cutting through the chaos like a gavel. Washington is a two-party consent state for audio, but there is a significant exception when the recording captures evidence of a violent felony or serious crime. Conspiracy to commit murder falls under that exception. This is entirely admissible. Murder? Brenda shouted, rushing to the table. My children would never. This is doctored. Valerie is crazy. I told you all, she's having a mental breakdown. Is the bank transfer doctored too, Brenda? I asked. I clicked the remote in my hand. The screen changed again. This time, it was a split screen. On the left, the wire transfer authorization I had signed that morning for $5 million to Greenleaf Logistics. On the right, a document from the Cayman Islands Registrar of Companies, obtained by Arthur's investigators just an hour ago, listing the sole beneficiary of Greenleaf Logistics. Beneficiary, Tiffany Davis. Signatory, Derek Johnson. You stole $5 million from this company this morning, I said, looking directly at Derek. You thought I was stupid. You thought I was weak. You thought you could rob me blind and then kill me. Derek opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the door. He was calculating his escape. Don't bother, I said. The doors are locked. I walked slowly around the table until I was standing right behind him. I leaned down, close to his ear, just like he used to do when he was manipulating me. You wanted full control, Derek? You wanted a life without me? Congratulations. You're about to have a very long time without me. About 20 years, give or take. Valerie, please, Derek whispered, his voice cracking. He reached for my hand, sweat dripping down his temple. It was just talk. We were venting. The money was an investment. I can explain. Explain it to them, I said, pointing to the door. At that moment, Sarah unlocked the boardroom doors. They burst open. 4 police officers walked in, followed by 2 detectives in suits. "Derek Johnson? Tiffany Davis?" the lead detective asked. "No," Tiffany whimpered. She shrank back in her chair, clutching her stomach. "No, I'm pregnant." "You can't arrest a pregnant woman." "You're under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder," the detective said, pulling out his handcuffs. The metallic clink-clink sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Derek stood up slowly. He looked at me one last time. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a small, pathetic man who had gambled everything and lost. "Valerie," he said. "I'm your husband." "Not anymore," I replied. "Now, you're just inmate number whatever they give you." "CTA, call to action." The police grabbed his arms. The reality of the moment washed over me, the adrenaline, the fear, the absolute triumph. I had done it. I watched as they dragged the man I once loved out of the room, his expensive shoes scuffing the carpet. I turned to look at the camera, narrator breaking the fourth wall. My hands are shaking as I recount this, even now. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I stood there, watching my entire life implode so that I could survive. If you are still listening to this story, if you are standing here with me in this boardroom, please hit that like button and type the number 1 in the comments below. Let me know you're with me. Let me know that justice matters to you. Your support tells me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't weak. Please, type 1 now, and let me tell you what happened when the dust finally settled. Wait. Narrator self-correction. I just gave you the climax, didn't I? But the story didn't end with the handcuffs. In fact, for the people in that room, the shock was just beginning. The police led Derek and Tiffany out. Tiffany was screaming obscenities, blaming Derek, blaming me, blaming the world. "He made me do it. He said he'd leave me if I didn't help him," she shrieked as they dragged her past the receptionist she had tormented just yesterday. The doors closed. The silence in the boardroom was deafening. I stood at the head of the table. My red suit felt like armor. I looked at the 12 board members. They were stunned. Some were pale, others were furiously checking their tablets, likely looking at the company's stock price. And then there was Brenda. Brenda was still standing in the corner. She hadn't been arrested, we didn't have enough concrete evidence to tie her to the murder plot or the theft, only moral complicity. But she looked as if she had been slapped. "You," Brenda hissed, stepping forward. Her fingers shook as she pointed it at me. "You ungrateful, vicious little." "Sit down, Brenda," Arthur Henderson boomed. "She sent her sister to jail." Brenda screamed, turning to the board. "She's a monster. She framed them. She doctored those tapes." I looked at Brenda. For years, I had feared this woman. I had sought her approval. I had let her make me feel small in my own home. But looking at her now, stripping away the fear, I saw what she really was, a leech. A parasite that had attached itself to my father and then to me. "Brenda," I said calmly. "The police have the bank records. They have the IP addresses. They have the audio files. There is no frame-up. Your daughter and my husband stole $5 million. And you knew about the pressure they were putting on me. You helped them gaslight me. I did no such thing." Brenda denied, clutching her pearls. "I was trying to help you." I turned to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the theatrical nature of this meeting. But it was necessary to secure the evidence to save this company. The $5 million has already been frozen by the bank thanks to Mr. Henderson's quick work. It will be returned to our accounts within 48 hours. The board members nodded. Mr. Sterling spoke up. Valery, that was remarkable. You saved the company from a disaster. I did, I said. But we need to clean house. Completely. I looked back at Brenda. Brenda, as of this moment, your stipend from the Sterling Trust is suspended pending an internal investigation into your involvement. You can't do that. Brenda screeched. Your father's will. My father's will left the stipend at the discretion of the trustee. I cut her off. I am the trustee. And I define conduct unbecoming of the family name as trying to drive the CEO insane. I will sue you. Go ahead, I shrugged. Use your own money. Oh, wait. You don't have any. You spent it all on Chanel suits and Tiffany's bail fund, which, by the way, is going to be set very, very high. I walked over to the door and opened it. 2 security guards were waiting. Please escort Mrs. Sterling out of the building, I said. And revoke her security clearance. She is banned from all Sterling properties effective immediately. Valery. I'm your mother. Brenda wailed as the guards took her arms. No, I said, my voice devoid of anger, just filled with a profound, quiet sadness. You were my father's wife. My mother died a long time ago. And she would have clawed your eyes out for what you did to me. They dragged her out. Her screams faded down the hallway. I closed the door. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood for a second, taking a deep breath. When I turned back to the table, the entire board stood up. They began to applaud. It wasn't polite applause. It was genuine, respectful applause. For the first time in my life, they didn't see me as Daddy's little girl or the placeholder CEO. They saw a leader. They saw a survivor. Now, I said, walking back to my chair and sitting down. Let's get back to business. We have a lot of work to do to repair our reputation. The next few months were a blur of legal battles and media frenzies. The Sterling scandal was front-page news in Seattle. CEO takes down cheating husband and stepsister in sting operation. It was sensational. But while the public ate up the drama, the reality inside the courtroom was grim. I had to testify. I had to sit on the stand and recount every detail of the betrayal. I had to listen to the recordings again in front of a jury. I had to watch Derek and Tiffany sitting at the defense table. They had turned on each other immediately. It was predictable, but still pathetic to watch. Derek's lawyer argued that Tiffany was the mastermind, the seductress who manipulated a stressed executive into embezzling funds. He claimed the murder talk was just Tiffany's fantasy that he was trying to placate. Tiffany's lawyer argued that Derek was a predator who used his position of power to groom her. She played the pregnant and hormonal card, sobbing that she only did what Derek told her because she was afraid of him. He threatened to fire me. Tiffany cried on the stand. He said he controlled the money. I just wanted my baby to have a father. It was a circus. But the evidence didn't lie. The digital footprints were clear. Derek initiated the transfers. Tiffany set up the shell companies. And their voices on the tape were equal partners in cruelty. The most satisfying moment came during the cross-examination of Derek. My lawyer, a shark Arthur had hired specifically for the criminal trial, asked him about the Plan B recording. Mr. Johnson, you claim you were placating Ms. Davis when you discussed tampering with your wife's brakes. Can you explain why, 3 days before that conversation, you conducted a Google search on your work computer for how to disable ABS brakes on a 2018 sedan? Derek's face crumbled. He hadn't realized IT could recover deleted search history. The jury gasped. That was the nail in the coffin. It wasn't just talk. He had researched it. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Grand larceny. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit murder. At the sentencing hearing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium, looking directly at Derek. He looked smaller, older. His hair was thinning. The prison jumpsuit washed him out. For 10 years, I said, my voice steady, I gave you everything. I gave you my heart, my home, my trust. And in return, you treated me like an obstacle. You didn't just want to leave me, you wanted to erase me. You wanted to end my life so you could buy sports cars and live in my house with my sister. I looked at Tiffany. She was visibly pregnant now, her face puffy from crying. And you, I said. You were my sister. We shared a home. I defended you when the world was hard on you. And you repaid me by climbing into my bed and plotting my death. I pity the child you are bringing into this world. But I will make sure that child knows the truth, so they don't grow up to be like you. The judge was unsparing. Derek Johnson, 25 years in a maximum security prison. No parole for at least 20. Tiffany Davis, 15 years. Due to the pregnancy, she would be housed in a special unit until the birth, after which the child would be placed in foster care or with relatives, but not Brenda, who was deemed unfit due to her enabling role. As the gavel banged, finalizing their fate, I felt nothing. Not joy. Not sadness. Just a massive weight lifting off my shoulders. The air in the courtroom suddenly felt breathable again. I walked out of the courthouse into the Seattle rain. But this time, the rain didn't feel gloomy. It felt cleansing. It was washing away the grime of the last decade. Arthur was waiting for me with an umbrella. It's over, Valerie, he said. Yes, I nodded, taking a deep breath of the wet air. It's finally over. Cleaning up the mess of a destroyed life takes longer than breaking it. The first thing I did was sell the penthouse. I couldn't live there anymore. Every corner held a memory of a lie. I sold it fully furnished. I didn't want the sofa Derek sat on, or the bed we slept in. I wanted a clean slate. I bought a beautiful, historic home on Queen and Hill. It had a garden, a view of the Sound, and it needed work. Renovating it became my therapy. I stripped the wallpaper, sanded the floors, and painted the walls colors I liked, not the beige and gray Derek had insisted were modern. Brenda tried to cling on. Without the stipend, she couldn't afford her condo. She lost her car. She was forced to move into a small apartment in a less desirable part of town. She tried to sue me, but Arthur crushed the lawsuit before it even reached a judge. One rainy Tuesday, she showed up at Sterling Interiors. She looked disheveled. The Chanel suit was stained. I need to see my daughter, she demanded at the front desk. And I need to speak to Valerie. I came down to the lobby. I didn't invite her up. We spoke near the fountain where I had thrown the photos months ago. I have no money, Valerie, Brenda pleaded, her pride finally broken. I can't pay rent. You can't let your mother live on the street. You aren't my mother, I repeated the mantra that had set me free. And you aren't destitute, Brenda. You're just poor. Like most people. You can get a job. Sterling Interiors is hiring janitorial staff. I can put in a good word for you. Her face twisted in rage. Janitor? Me? It's honest work, I said. More honest than what you've been doing for the last 20 years. She spat at my feet and stormed out. I never saw her again. I heard she moved to Florida to live with a distant cousin. Good riddance. The company, surprisingly, flourished. The scandal, rather than ruining us, had painted me as a strong, no-nonsense leader. Clients admired my resolve. Sales went up 20% that year. I rebranded, moving away from the stuffy image of my father's era to something bolder, more female-centric. I also started a foundation. The green silk foundation, named after my ruined prom dress. It provided scholarships and legal aid to women trapped in abusive or coercive financial relationships. It was my way of turning my pain into power. But the hardest part was the quiet. Coming home to an empty house. No one to ask how my day was. No one to eat dinner with. For a year, I dated no one. I focused on me. I traveled. I went to Italy alone and drank wine in Tuscany, just like I had told Derek I wanted to. It was better without him. I realized I didn't need a man to complete me. I was a whole person all on my own. 3 years later, I was standing in the garden of my home on Queen and pruning the hydrangeas. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city. I was 41 now, and I had never felt more beautiful. Valery? I turned around. Standing on the porch was Mark. Mark was an architect I had hired to help with the company rebrand. He was 45, with laugh lines around his eyes and hands rough from working with wood. He wasn't slick like Derek. He didn't wear Italian suits. He wore flannel and drove a truck. He was kind. He was quiet. And he knew my whole story and didn't care about the money. "Dinner's ready," he smiled. "I made that pasta you like." "I'll be right there," I said. I looked down at my hands. There was dirt under my fingernails. I wasn't the pristine, perfect doll Brenda had tried to mold. I was real. I walked up to the porch and Mark kissed me. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't for show. It was just a kiss. "Happy anniversary," he whispered. "It's not our anniversary," I laughed. "We've only been dating for 10 months. "I know," he said. "But it's the anniversary of the day you took your life back. The day of the board meeting. I think that's worth celebrating." I teared up. He remembered. "Yes," I said. "It is." We sat on the porch, eating pasta, watching the lights of Seattle twinkle on. I thought about Derek, sitting in his cell, probably telling lies to other inmates about how he used to be a CEO. I thought about Tiffany, raising her child in the system. The baby had been adopted by a lovely family in Oregon. I made sure of that anonymously. They were the ghosts of my past. They couldn't hurt me anymore. I had one. Not just the lawsuit, not just the money. I had won myself back. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales. I received a letter yesterday. It was from the prison. Derek had applied for early parole. He wanted me to write a letter of support. He claimed he was a changed man who had found religion. I sat at my desk, the same desk where I had once found the ultrasound, and I pulled out a piece of paper. I wrote one sentence. To the parole board, a tiger does not change its stripes, it just learns to hunt better in the dark. Keep the lights off. I mailed it. Parole was denied. I looked at the photo on my desk. It wasn't of Derek anymore. It was of me, Mark, and a scruffy dog we had adopted from the shelter. We were laughing. My eyes were bright. I picked up the phone and called Arthur Henderson, who was now retired but still my dear friend. "Arthur," I said. "I'm thinking of expanding the business. Opening a branch in London." "London?" Arthur chuckled. "You don't stop, do you, Valery?" "Why should I?" I asked. "I'm just getting started." I hung up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. A rainbow arched over the sound, vibrant and defiant against the gray clouds. My journey started with a photo in a wallet. A photo of betrayal. But it ended with a different picture. A picture of a woman who walked through the fire and came out made of steel. If you are listening to this, and you feel stuck, or scared, or small, remember me. Remember that the person who holds the pen writes the ending. Don't let anyone else hold your pen. This is Valerie Sterling, signing off. And living happily ever after. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but I hope it gives you strength. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button and share this video with a friend who needs a reminder of their own power. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and triumph. I love reading your comments, so tell me below, what would you have done if you found that photo? Until next time, stay strong. Looking back at Valerie's journey, we see far more than just a family drama. We witness a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her story serves as a profound reminder that betrayal, though devastating, often becomes the catalyst for our greatest awakening. It teaches us that our true worth is not defined by how much we endure in silence, but by the courage we find to set boundaries and protect our peace. Valerie proves that it is never too late to rewrite your narrative and that walking away from toxicity is an act of supreme self-love. We hope this story inspires you to recognize your own strength in the face of adversity. If you found value in this lesson and believe in the importance of reclaiming your dignity, please share your thoughts below or simply comment good to show that you are standing strong with us today.